last episode, we put aside the landscape materials and textures for the time being, as they were in a pretty alright spot. Now we're going to move on to some of the smaller assets that are necessary to bring our forest to life. Okay, so for some changes. By the time I finished editing the last video, I decided that the way that I was working was not going to be sustainable for the long term. So I've decided that from now on, I'm going to implement an agile approach to Sanctia's development. I'll focus on 2-week sprints, decide on what fits into those 2 weeks, while leaving time for editing and other things to pop up. Then at the end of the video, I'll have already planned out the next sprint so I can talk about what I'll be doing over the following 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks for a devlog is probably the most sustainable cadence. I don't think that I'd be able to do a weekly devlog. So here's how it'll work in my task board. I have everything organized into milestones. I'll generally be working towards one milestone at a time. Inside of each milestone, it is broken down into tasks. At the moment, this is fairly high level because it's mostly modeling and I don't need to break it down any further. But that will most likely change in the future as this task gets smaller and will take a larger amount of time when we delve into things like animation and programming. So you can see here that I've created a new field in the individual tasks to choose what sprint that will be in. This then allows me to sort each of the tasks by sprint rather than milestone. So as you can see, for the next 2 weeks, I'll be working on the forest rocks, some tree roots, a new type of grass, 2 more types of flowers, and something like a fern. So it's currently Wednesday and I've just finished up the high poly sculpts for the rocks. I haven't had much of a chance to work on these as I would have liked since I've gotten up a little bit later these last few mornings. I wanted to try and get highly reusable rocks for this, for these 3, considering I was only making 3 of them. I found the key to this is to actually not make any one rock too interesting and instead keep them as generic as possible. It's a balance to walk between a boring rock and a generic rock. So that's kind of where the back and forth happens. You'll see that I also used the shading pass in ZBrush to see the shadow shapes on the rock, and that really helps to see whether I have too many unique shapes. It shows whether the shapes that it does produce are pleasing. So here you can see all the rocks collected together. After this, we start using the Zebra Mesher tool in ZBrush to get a low poly version of each of our rocks and then reproject them onto the high poly rocks. That finishes our low and high poly rocks, and then we export them to Maya to do the UVs. So from here I just follow the same traditional modeling techniques that are used in most other props. I try to keep the scenes as simple as possible and have them in areas that are unobtrusive. And now for actually my favorite part, which is the texturing. A lot of this was just going back and forth, trying different things out until I found something that sort of fit the aesthetic that I had in my head. One of the key considerations for this was that eventually I want to proceduralize my rock pipeline. I don't want to be creating every single rock in the world by hand, understanding that I will need quite a few over the life of the project. So I've created a few digital assets in Houdini that have done this for me in the past, but I haven't really been able to nail down and decide on a style. So what I'm hoping to do here is keep it simple enough that I know how to proceduralize it in the future, but use this sort of as a style finding mission for future work. If I do decide to proceduralize my rock pipeline, I'll probably make it a separate video just so that everyone else can sort of see how that works. It's now Saturday afternoon and it's been a bit of a stressful week at work this week. So I thought I'd zen out and do some traditional sketching in my sketchbook of the tree roots that we'll be tackling this week. Nothing fancy here, just some plain pencil sketching. Technically, it's not 100% necessary for me to do this, but I find it cathartic and relaxing. This will probably just be a bit of a quiet time during the video.
Slide sound, you know what I mean? Like a bird that flies above the violence. Like a word that cuts through the silence. There's a light that keeps shining, that keeps rising in us. Yeah. Like a wire that cuts through the silence. Yeah. There's a light that keeps shining and a tide that keeps rising in us. Yeah.
So next up was modelling the tree root, and boy was this a pain in the ass. I got pretty far along before realising that the style that I was going with for these tree roots isn't really the style that I would like to finish up with. It's a bit too detailed. I'd prefer it to be much simpler, and actually this made me reevaluate a lot of what I had as a preconceived notion of what the style would be for the entire game in my head. It's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. I think that at the end of the day, I will probably end up completely redoing all of these tree roots. And it's not because I don't like them, it's just that I don't think that they'll match with the rest of the aesthetic that I have in my head. But in terms of the process for these, they're all identical to the process that we did for the rocks. And actually, the base material is the same smart material that we ended up saving out of Substance Painter for the rocks that we developed the first time around. So it was just altered a little bit to make it a bit more bark-like. So I probably won't spend too much time dwelling on this part of the video. It's just a bit of a time lapse to make sure that everyone can see the process that I went through for this. But let me tell you what, doing UVs for tree roots fucking sucks. So it's now a chilly Saturday morning before the sprint ends. So far we've gotten the rocks and the root assets completed. The next thing that we're going to move into is the different foliage types. So I want to show you guys a Houdini asset that I've been building for the last couple of weeks. It's still not fully featured. I want to have it so that it can make a large amount of different types of foliage. Currently it will just make really one type of grass and can put a type of flower in it. So I guess we'll just jump into doing that. So this is the asset that I want to show you guys. As you can see here, I've actually had a bunch of problems with the scale inside of Unreal, so I've just built a 1 meter by 1 meter cube that we can use as a scale reference, and that's just a separate top level piece of geometry here. So before we dive in, I'll just show you the feature set. So this is the grass. So you can see it's really simple, and if you look at the wireframe, it's a quite high poly for grass, but when I generate this, I save out a whole 3 different types of LODs for it. Okay, so let's start by looking at just a single grass blade. We've got control over a whole bunch, so basically over the resolution here, and the overall height of the grass. Then we've got the shape curve, so I can create almost any shape that I would like. Currently it has to be mirrored. That's going to be something that I may change in the future. Down here, texture sheet. Control how many blades that we have, and these bend at a random amount. This requires a little bit of playing around with, and I want to make this much more robust in the future. It depends on how much bend is in the blade grass itself, for how much the how many blades that you can fit on here, but otherwise it calculates it automatically. So if we go and change this to a grass clump, this is our output clump. And we can do a number of things. So this is the universal scale. So this is what I want to use to determine, so if we turn this back on, how big to make the grass clump. So previously I did have a lot of issues. This is actually a new addition. I did have a lot of issues scaling it in Unreal, and I think that if I don't get it right in the first place, it'll really affect the some of the scattering that we want to do with it. So this allows me to change how long and wide these are. So you can see, you can see that this changes the width and of the circle that this gets, or the oval, I guess, if it's not square, that this gets copied onto. And you can do things like change the noise and get a whole bunch of different variations for the grass that we can use to paint around. This is the fall off from the center. So if we want to have less density over here, you can see that they get back in the square. You can see that it sort of is less dense and then more dense in the middle. And then what it allows us to do is that we just change the mesh name here. So we go, so let's call this clump E, SM clump E. Now it'll for some reason go, so that renders out the grass texture. That's the gradient. I'm thinking of pulling that into the shader somehow so that I can change the color from a single channel rather than a three channel base color. And then here's our log controls underneath this, which, so this is LOD 0, this is LOD 1, this is LOD 2. So those are the automatic, and that's at 50% and then 10%. And then that's it. So that would have rendered out all three of our, so if we open it up in a folder, we've got LOD 1, 2, and 3 of clump E, and we should have clump E texture here. So we've got the two clump textures there. So this is how I'm planning on creating a few different variations for the grass, change up the colors, and build it up from there. Now, what I want to know from you guys is that I did have doing a fern on the sprint. What I'm thinking is that I'll push that out and just, one of the things that I want to do is to expand and make another foliage generator for larger plants. So more fern-like, or like a bromeliad like I have over in the corner here. Let me just grab this and let's see if we can make this get closer to the camera. I'm not going to catch focus though. Yep. So something similar to that. I think I might try and make that in a generator for that in Houdini. So if that's something that you're interested in, I can do that and record that and do a bit of a tutorial around that. Let me know in the comments. Happy to do that. Otherwise, I'll just make it off screen, or maybe even just make a single one and go from there. I'm gonna jump into Houdini and make a couple of the variations so that we can start pulling them into Engine. So let's go. Let's have a look. Okay, that's not what I wanted to know. That's still not. Okay, yep. Alright, what's the full screen button? F11? F11, alright. So, played around with the lighting a little bit. Got a few rocks in, got our nice grass in here. Still not happy with the scale of things. Sort of see the LODs popping in and out on those bigger ones, which we definitely have to fix. But all in all, colors could be a bit better as well. But it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. definitely needs some more work, layering in some more of the props. But I think this will work. I've done only this small little wedge here. Still need to do all of this stuff over here, and including a bit more level design to make this a bit more. Oh yeah, oh god. And I gotta change the normal map on the grass tiling texture to not be a default floor texture, but all in all, looking pretty good. So okay, so I think that's it for this sprint, and that's actually also it for this. That's also it for this milestone as well. So we've got a basic level. I'll still fill it out, but we've got all the assets that we need for a basic level. It'll be good once we can do another pass on trees and make another couple of stumps. There's some things that I'm not happy with. I'm not actually happy with the style of the routes at all, but this is enough to start building the first level, start getting some characters in, enemies in, doing some architecture, and seeing what the style that we want to go with for the whole lot. Next sprint is either going to be our first enemy in here, or we're going to do a character. I think we'll go with character. I've never done a main character before, so this should be interesting. This is going to be challenging. I have no idea where I'm even going to start with this, but I think that's what we're going to need next to be able to start doing some basic gameplay programming. So, pretty excited for that. I guess. So the next thing I'll do is probably map out the backlog for the character, do some research, and go from there. So, alright, well, thanks for watching this video, and do the things, and I'll catch you in 2 weeks' time.